In Dennis Lehane's 2014 crime thriller The Drop, Tom Hardy plays Bob Saginowski, a soft-spoken Brooklyn bartender who works at a bar secretly owned by the Chechen MAFIA. His cousin Marv, played by James Gandolfini in his final film role, manages the establishment. Based on Dennis Lehane's short story Animal Rescue, the same author behind Mystic River and Shutter Island, this R-rated crime drama directed by Michael R. Roscom earned an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. One evening in this neo-noir thriller, elderly patrons gather to watch basketball and complain about the team wasting $80 million to bring aging players across the river. As Tom Hardy's character Bob brings their drinks, they raise glasses to a late friend named Richie Whelan from Fort Hamilton's class of 1992, dead about 10 years now and remembered as a funny prick who they still toast on this anniversary. When Bob offers a free round, James Gandolfini's Marv immediately scolds him and questions whether he paid for it himself. Bob explains they're celebrating a close friend's anniversary, but Marv points out the kid's been gone a decade, and eventually you need to stop scoring free drinks off a corpse. Marv's complaints continue when he spots Millie, an elderly woman sitting at the bar who never pays for her drinks. Bob argues she doesn't drink much, and Marv demands to know when Bob last charged her anything. In The Drop, Bob attends Mass regularly as a devout Catholic and recites prayers during the service. But when communion begins and the priest offers the body of Christ, Bob consistently stands in line only to skip taking communion at the last moment because he avoids confessing his past sins. After Mass one evening, Bob walks through his Brooklyn neighborhood and hears whimpering from a trash can. Inside, he discovers a severely injured pit bull puppy bleeding and left to die. A woman emerges from a nearby house demanding to know what he's doing in her trash, and Bob explains there's a dog inside. He insists it's a boxer, but the woman corrects him before examining the puppy and confirming it's bleeding. She demands to see his license. Nadia, played by Noomi Rapace, photographs his driver's license and tells him she just sent that picture to 4 people for safety. They bring him inside Nadia's house where she examines the injuries more closely. Someone beat the hell out of this dog, and she points out knots on the puppy's head that aren't skull but contusions from repeated blows. Bob asks if she's a vet, and Nadia explains she's a waitress at the Ashmont Grill who worked one summer as a tech at Animal Rescue. These dogs are hard to find homes for because of their breed, and when Bob asks about boxers, Noomi Rapace's character corrects him again that this is a pit bull. Bob expresses concern that pit bulls are dangerous dogs. Nadia argues it's not the dog's fault when the owner is a dick, and she shows Bob the puppy who's nothing but sweet despite everything. Bob notices marks on Nadia's neck but doesn't mention them. Nadia agrees to care for him temporarily if Bob promises to return in 2 days. Meanwhile, 2 brothers nervously discuss robbing Marv's bar, where the older brother insists they need to prove themselves to their boss. The younger brother is a drug addict who's terrified because he knows the bar is a Chechen drop spot. But the older brother convinces him they have no choice. That night, masked men burst into the bar just before closing and hold guns on the staff while ordering Marv to open the safe. Marv warns them they're making a mistake, but under threat, he fills a bag with cash. Bob observes carefully during the chaos. One robber wears a broken watch, stopped at 6:15, which Bob notes. After the robbers flee, Bob and Marv find their employee Randy in the backyard, brutally beaten to death. Detective Torres arrives to investigate and recognizes Bob from attending St. Rocco's Church for years, though they've never actually spoken. Bob explains the robbers wore full masks, but he mentions one detail about the broken watch stopped at 6:15, and Torres asks about the amount stolen, roughly $5,000, Bob tells him. Torres also notes that Bob consistently skips the communion line at church, which Bob denies even though the truth is he avoids communion to skip confessing sins he can't come back from. Marv grows furious when he learns Bob revealed the broken watch detail because he fears the Chechens will be enraged. In this crime thriller, The Drop, Bob returns to retrieve the pit bull puppy and invites Nadia to a pet store since he's never owned a dog before. At the store, she picks out bowls, a leash, poop bags, and a care guide, while Bob suggests naming the dog Mike, though Nadia prefers Rocco. They create a Rocco name tag even though Bob still favors Mike. And the next morning at church, Bob notices a statue of St. Rocco with a dog and finds it amusing. After shopping, Bob drops Nadia home without realizing that Eric Deeds watches them from down the block. The next morning, Bob and Marv shovel snow outside the bar when a van pulls up and Chaka, the Chechen boss who owns the bar, steps out. Inside the van lies one of the robbers, brutally tortured and gagged with his foot pinned to the floor by a spike. Chaka questions whether Marv and Bob know this man, and they don't, so he asks how police learned about the broken watch. Bob desperately apologizes, and Chaka orders Marv to return the stolen money before speeding away. Marv feels uneasy because if Chaka already knows how to recover the money, it suggests Marv may have been involved in the robbery. Detective Torres uncovers that 10 years ago, Marv lost his bar to the Chechen Mafia led by Papa Umarov, Chaka's father, and when Torres asks colleagues about taking down Umarov, they laugh because he's too powerful. Tom Hardy's character Bob enjoys spending time with Rocco despite being inexperienced with dog care, which means he often finds himself cleaning up after the pit bull puppy and learning as he goes. One morning at the dog park, Bob plays with Rocco when Nadia approaches during her jog through the Brooklyn neighborhood. She mentions losing her night shift at the restaurant and offers to care for Rocco for extra cash, which Bob accepts immediately since he's already attracted to her. They exchange phone numbers, and after they part ways, Eric Deeds appears from nowhere. Eric approaches Bob with a smile and compliments his dog, calling it a nice pit bull. But Bob senses something off about this man. He grabs Rocco's leash tightly and walks away quickly without engaging. Marv lives with his sister Dottie while their father remains in a nursing home, barely alive, and kept going only by machines. The siblings discuss his condition, and Dottie is frustrated by the constant expense and seeming futility of it all, suggesting they unplug their father so they could enjoy life, travel to Europe, and live a little. Marv strongly disagrees. He insists they owe their father lifelong care no matter the cost or how long it takes, refusing to sacrifice their duty for convenience or comfort because family is family. Marv later confronts one of the robbers named Fitz and reveals that Fitz orchestrated the entire heist, scolding him harshly because not only did Fitz's brother make the stupid mistake of wearing a broken watch, but Fitz also beat Randy so badly that an ambulance had to be called, bringing police attention that endangered everything. At Bob's house, he talks to Rocco and apologizes for not taking him out sooner when a knock comes at the door. Eric Deeds stands there and rudely enters without invitation, pushing past Bob and demanding to know where the puppy is while claiming it's his dog. Bob is confused and refuses to comply, and Eric insists that if Bob truly owns the dog, he must have a security chip and license, since these are legally required to prove ownership. Eric shows Bob documentation with the chip serial number, implying he owns Rocco. Bob argues that Eric has a clear history of abusing the animal given the knots, bruises, and injuries, but Eric threatens to go to the police and blame Bob for everything. When Bob asks what he really wants, Eric takes Bob's umbrella from the stand near the door before leaving. Bob's relationship with Numi Rapace's Nadia strengthens thanks to Rocco. They meet at a cafe for coffee where Nadia reveals something personal, telling Bob he's the first person to not question her neck marks, the scars she carries. Bob responds simply that it's her private matter and he won't judge, explaining that whatever happened is her business. Nadia admits her dark past when one night while high, she cut her neck with a potato peeler in a desperate attempt to end her life because she couldn't see any other way out. She survived the attempt and gradually, painfully rebuilt a normal, meaningful life day by day, getting clean, finding work, and starting over. At the bar, Marv voices concern about a suspicious stranger who asked for directions earlier, and he still harbors resentment over losing his bar to Chaka a decade ago since deep down, Marv despises himself. Bob discovers something disturbing in a trash bag outside containing a severed hand alongside blood-covered money, the stolen cash, the broken watch, and the chopped hand all returned. Both Bob and Marv are puzzled about who returned them and why. So Bob takes the severed hand inside and expertly wraps it, impressing Marv, who wonders if Bob has done this before. Eric suddenly barges in through the unlocked door. Marv tries to send him away, insisting they're closed, and Bob nearly gets caught, but Eric merely greets him and leaves. Marv grows concerned when he learns Eric claims ownership of Rocco since Eric is a local thug rumored to have killed Richie Whelan, the man honored in the opening toast. Marv warns Bob that Eric spent time in a mental institution and jail, but Bob remains unfazed. Bob places the severed hand in a duffel bag and heads outside, and after he leaves, Marv breaks down in tears, while meticulously removing blood from the money before preparing to return it to the Chechens. Bob disposes of the wrapped hand by tossing it into the river, just as Detective Torres approaches, inquiring whether Bob knows Eric Deeds. Bob denies it, and the Chechens arrive at the bar to retrieve the stolen money, while Chaka informs them his bar will serve as the drop bar on Super Bowl night. Eric confronts Bob and presses him about Nadia, specifically whether she has harmed herself recently. Bob immediately goes to Nadia to ask how she knows Eric, and startled, Nadia storms off. Marv meets with Fitz, who is visibly shaken and traumatized by losing his brother, and Fitz double-checks that Marv's trunk isn't lined with plastic while displaying his pistol for protection. The trunk is safe, and Fitz climbs in when Marv offers him a chance to participate in the Super Bowl robbery with massive money in the bar, but Fitz refuses and only wants to survive. Marv orders him out. Fitz complies nervously, and Marv runs him over repeatedly, killing him instantly before changing cars and driving away. Bob and Nadia meet, and she apologizes for her earlier behavior, confessing she and Eric once dated, and he was charming at first but soon revealed his cruelty before they broke up. Nadia also reveals Deeds is the one who killed Richie Whelan, though Bob already knows this rumor. Marv meets Eric in a diner and tells him Bob fears him. Eric claims he wants Bob's respect and threatens trouble if he doesn't get it, so Marv calms him by insisting he has a plan benefiting everyone, when in reality Marv intended to use Eric for the Super Bowl robbery. Detective Torres receives Eric's psychological file and notices something that catches his attention. At home, Bob calls for Rocco, but the dog doesn't respond until he finds Rocco safely in his crate along with his umbrella, proving Eric had been there. Bob confronts Eric and demands he back off, but Eric demands $10,000 to release the dog, and Bob refuses since he's unable to meet the price. Marv tells Bob he won't be at the bar during the Super Bowl, raising Bob's skepticism because he senses they're attempting something risky. Marv, haunted by his former glory days before losing the bar to Chaka, yells at Bob because he's convinced Bob's kindness to Millie is meant to humiliate him. Bob calmly assures him it's just a stool with no hidden meaning, and at the bar, Bob secures $10,000 in the basement. Throughout Super Bowl night, different mob groups drop off cash at the bar until eventually the bar empties, except for Eric and Nadia. Eric had broken into Nadia's home earlier and coerced her to accompany him, showing her his gun before stepping outside for a smoke. Worried, Nadia warns Bob that Deeds intends to shoot him, and when Eric returns, Bob offers him the money for the dog. Deeds asks how much Nadia is worth and insists he'd prefer the money in the safe, but Bob refuses and begins recounting the story of Richie Whelan. Bob claims he killed Richie because Marv, a loan shark with a severe gambling problem, was owed money by Richie, who won a large sum at the casino and paid Marv back, but it wasn't enough to cover the debt. Bob tracked Richie down and shot him twice in the face, ensuring no one would know he had repaid Marv, and Bob questions Eric about claiming credit for the murder. Without hesitation, Bob shoots Eric twice in the face and reassures Nadia she is now safe for life and free to leave. Nadia is stunned that he trusts her not to reveal the murder. The Chechens arrive and dispose of Eric's body while Chaka, who respected Bob from the start, offers him control of the bar and renames it Bob's Bar. Bob protests that he's just a bartender, but Chaka remains firm and declares Bob is now the new Marv. Outside, the suspicious man from earlier approaches Marv's car, and before James Gandolfini's character can react, he is shot in the head. Detective Torres arrives to investigate, and with Marv dead and Eric missing, Bob remains unfazed since this is the Brooklyn neighborhood he knows. Torres informs Bob the church property has been purchased for residential development and asks if Bob will attend the closing, and he agrees. Torres also reveals Eric couldn't have killed Richie Whelan since he was in a mental clinic at the time. Leaning close, Torres whispers that no one ever sees Bob coming, and though lacking concrete evidence, the detective suspects Bob is responsible for both Whelan's and Deeds' deaths. But above all, he doesn't want to tangle with Papa Umarov's mob. Bob delivers Rocco to Nadia's home and apologizes for the chaotic night at the bar, feeling embarrassed by his past actions. He explains killing someone like Eric was unavoidable because people like him never stop blackmailing others, and Bob asks Nadia if they can spend time together. A mix of fear and affection fills her as Nadia agrees and says she'll get her jacket, bringing Dennis Lehane's dark crime drama to its haunting conclusion.